conflate the two, when you conflate being Jewish with being Israeli, or you substitute a Jew in place of Israeli, that is where you cross lines into anti-Semitism. You can be anti-Israel, you can be an anti-Zionist, and most of the time that is not anti-Semitic. But what Project 2025, what Project Esther has done is weaponize Jewish trauma to advance an authoritarian agenda.
Today on Center Stage, Kevin Racklin, the Washington director at Nexus Project, a non-profit organization focused on advocacy, education, and policy work around anti-Semitism, particularly how it intersects with Israel-related issues. Racklin joined Center Stage to explain why he believes the term anti-Semitism is being weaponized as part of the right-wing Project Esther and the larger Project 2025, which has been linked to the Trump administration's crackdown on pro-Palestinian voices. Kevin Racklin, welcome to Center Stage. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's drill down that one word, or that one term rather, anti-Semitism. It's something we hear banded around in the media. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Just help us put a pin in it. What is the definition, would you say, of anti-Semitism?
Well, that question is actually a lot harder than most people think and say.
Okay.
The generalized definition, when we're talking about what is and what is not anti-Semitism, is general discrimination or attitude towards hate towards Jews or the Jewish people at large by a variety of different ways. There's different tropes involved, including blood libel, which is like essentially saying that Jews are trying to replace one other people. That's also links into the Great Replacement theory, to even going even further into the puppet master theories and the Rothberg theories that we control everything. And those are all kind of the basics around what is and what is not anti-Semitic. But then there are also currently right now 3 separate definitions that are out there kind of circulating around that are aiming to provide more context and information about what is and what is not anti-Semitic.
And it's not necessarily against the actions of the Israeli government.
Correct.
It's
I was very specific when I noticed I didn't even say that. Yes.
But that's one of the things that we've heard a lot about is it against Jewish people, or is it against what the Israeli government's doing, and is there a line?
There's absolutely a line, I would say, between what the Israeli government is doing versus what Israel is doing versus the larger Jewish population in the world. And I think that when you conflate the two, when you conflate being Jewish with being Israeli, or you substitute a Jew in place of Israeli, that is where you cross lines into anti-Semitism. But what I normally say to people is, you can be anti-Israel, you can be an anti-Zionist, and most of the time that is not anti-Semitic. But some of the time it actually is anti-Semitic. And being able to identify when certain language and the impact of your language impacts Jews in a specific way is actually really important for people. And I think in this day and age, so many individuals kind of paint with a broad brush, which is why we're seeing so many new accusations of anti-Semitism out there right now, specifically towards college campuses, around protests around Palestinian freedoms, pro-Palestinian rights, things like that, where you're starting to blur the line between being pro-Israel, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, anti-Palestinian, and all of these are starting to get muddled into the anti-Semitism debate right now.
All right, so we've got that. We'll park that to one side for just a second, and we'll come back to it in a minute. Let's look at the projects.
Yes.
Okay, so Project 2025 was a term we heard so much last year throughout the election campaign. It is essentially a policy, a document, a theory that was put together by a number of conservative organizations,
mainly the
Heritage Foundation, which is a big conservative think tank in Washington, D.C., and it outlined what a future or a second Trump presidency could look like. And I went to so many events where Kamala Harris said, Project 2025, this is a warning, this is going to happen.
It was real.
I went to so many Trump events where he said, nothing to do with me, know nothing about it, it's nothing to do with me. Some on the left are now saying it is coming to life. First of all, is that something you would agree with?
Yes.
And secondly, all right, Project Esther, which is the other project. What is that?
Yeah.
How does it all tie together?
So I actually think it's a really cool. So to answer the first question, I 100% think it is coming to fruition when you go back and read through all of Project 2025, which I have unfortunately done, including I made sure to read the entire section on the Department of Education, because that was really important as we're talking about anti-Semitism on college campuses. What they have done, what they've outlined in Project 25, this administration has begun to do and is continuing to do. Look at what has happened to USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. Look at what happened to the Development Finance Corporation. Look what's happened to the Department of Education, U.S. Institute for Peace. These were all I identified in Project 25 as things to be either shut down, rolled back, or just quote unquote non-American, and not for what this administration has been doing. What was scary about 2025 was how detailed it was. And it was very clear that the writers, including the current director of the Office of Management and Budget in the administration right now, knew what they were going to do right when they came into office, that there was a plan and that they were going to execute it, that it wasn't going to be like it was in the first term, which was kind of, the first year was whatever, just kind of crazy. Let's talk about Esther, though, because this is something that didn't really come out until October 24. And to your point, everyone was talking about 2025. Very few people, myself, others in my space, were talking about Project Esther. It is an addendum, is for lack of a better term, to 2025. And by that I mean Project 2025 is the blueprint on how to transition the American system of government into an autocracy. And that's, I think, the first thing. It's to systematically change how we as a nation are going to operate, what it's going to mean, and things like that. Project Esther is the means to do it. And what it is, what they claim it is, I should say, and I want to be very clear what they claim versus what it is they claim it is a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism throughout the country, that they believe it is a national priority to combat anti-Semitism. And to that, I actually applaud.
If you're shopping for a home, Realtor.com's Real Commute tool lets you find homes close to work.
I actually applaud. I agree. It is a national priority. That's why myself, Nexus, every other major legacy Jewish organization, a new Jewish organization, pretty much supported the Biden national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, which came out in 2023. And so it was very odd to see this other one come out that had no Jewish input, was written mostly by Christian Zionists, and coming from a major conservative think tank. So why was this happening? And when you start to read the document, you understand. One, they label everything that is not essentially conservative as the Hamas support network. And they go through systematically on how to attack those organizations to essentially eradicate, quote unquote, anti-Semitism from the United States government. Just to give you a couple of examples of what Project Esther has talked about and things to do. They claim that our colleges and universities are rife with anti-Semitism, that they're filled with foreign money, and that our universities should be defunded until that is properly addressed. I can rightfully say how many universities at this point have had their funding cut. Had Harvard, Columbia, UCLA system, the UC system in California have all been threatened or have had funding cut for quote unquote anti-Semitism. But what's stark about it is that what they're cutting isn't money to the Middle East programs. It's for cancer research. It's for robotics. It's for artificial intelligence. And to which I say, that is not, if the issue is what's being taught in the Middle East studies and what is being taught there, what does canceling cancer research do to protect me as a Jew? And the answer is it's not. The ideology behind this is to really hobble and hinder public universities and higher education at large as a means to create this new environment that they want America to become. And that's just one example out of many that Esther talks about. But what Project 2025, what Project Esther has done is weaponize Jewish trauma to advance an authoritarian agenda.
So how does all this link in with the issue of freedom of speech? Because there is a thing here in the United States called the First Amendment,
Love it.
which, you can't incite violence, but you can pretty much say what you want. And that may include what some would term hate speech, no matter how unpalatable your views may be seen by others, no matter how disgusting some people may say, you can say what you want.
Absolutely.
How does this how do you square the circle?
How do you square the circle? It's actually very interesting because you're right. In this country, and very rarely around the world, we are one of the few places that has enshrined that freedom of speech. But I would say is that in this country, you are allowed to say and think despicable things. And that's it. I can sit next to somebody and say, I absolutely hate what you're espousing. I think it's vile. I think it's evil. However, you have every right to say and think that. It's when that starts to translate into action that things become issues. So when speech becomes intimidation, when speech becomes discrimination, when speech turns into violence, that is when the First Amendment pulls back, and That's when you get civil rights laws and actual law to come into place. When somebody is threatened or discriminated against by virtue of who they are, that is when it's time to start. That's the real intervention starts to happen. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't make an effort to change those people's hearts and minds now. And I think what a lot of people are, and I think particularly in my community, what we've started to see post 10/7 is this thrust to kind of hit everybody over the head of what this is without really taking the time to educate, without sitting down with people and actually talking to them at face value and saying, let's talk about what you just said and